Okay, take two. Guys, welcome back to Coliseum Forum. I'm joined tonight with let's see, Eisner Award winner, Ringo Award winner, and I missed it last time, but this time Harvey Award winner, Mr. Tom King, known for some of the best works at Marvel with Vision here. We've also got Mr. Miracle with Mitch Gerard, which is sort of how this all happened, because Mitch was like, hey, I want to do some interviews. And you were like, me too. And then we were like, hey, yeah, we'll do that. We do an interview thing. And here we are.
Well, what a pleasure to be here. I'm glad you guys responded to that. It made my day. It would suck to be like, we want to do some interviews, and then you just get crickets. So you guys made both of our days. And thank you for having me. Thank you for selling my comics. Thank you for everything. It's greatly appreciated.
But that's the thing. Thank you for making cool comics that we can sell. I mean, this is something we were talking about kind of in the pre-interview before we got started. But I mean, if there aren't books like Mr. Miracle or Vision, like what else am I selling? Or let's talk about what we've got out literally today. You can go into your LCS and find Hard Target #4 is out today, and then Batman Catwoman special #1, right? Or is it is one?
It is. It's one. Yeah, it's special. Yeah. I wrote that comic so long ago. It's hard. I think I wrote in 2019 or early in 2020. So it became.
So I have to ask then, was it originally supposed to be part of the original run, like the 100?
No, it was supposed to be. You know, it's not a shocker to anyone to hear this, but Batcat's been, the art on it has slowed it down a little bit. Clay has been doing the work of his life, and it just takes a long time to put that many lines on the page. And so we wanted to do something to give the fans, some content while Clay put all those beautiful lines on. And so we cooked up this this special annual whatever, just to fill that gap, and wrote it for JP. I had no idea he was even sick, and I wrote the script you read today. I wrote that for JP, about sort of the whole history of Catwoman, and then he tragically passed away halfway through it, which was really terrible. And because we were talking, he never even mentioned. I mean, we were like close friends, we were work colleagues. He didn't even talk about it. And then it became a much bigger thing, because then it became like, okay, we have to make this sort of issue about JP and about honoring his sort of legacy at both Marvel, DC, and in comics in general.
And there's some, I mean, it's been out all of 24 hours, and there's already talk of this being like the issue of the year, like not of Batman, but like of comics in 2022. Batman Catwoman special is that issue.
Take that, Saga. Think you can come on our territory?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go away, Brian K. Vaughan, for another 2.5 years. Staples. Nobody cares about Saga. No, that's not true. I actually I have my laptop propped up with all the Saga omnibuses right now, so I actually really care about Saga.
I love that series and was super excited. But I can't tell you that I wasn't sad when I realized. I was like, oh, that amazing big issue is coming out the exact same time this whole issue we're working on for 2 years comes. Like, oh no.
So for the people that aren't familiar with their work, kind of let's start at the beginning. You started kind of as an intern at Marvel, right? You were working under Chris Claremont, is that correct?
I was a classic comic book nerd, especially a Marvel zombie as a kid. I wasn't a Wednesday warrior, I was a Saturday warrior, because I scootered after school. I grew up in West Los Angeles, so I'm wearing a Lakers hat, and would scooter to my local comic shop, Comics Inc., in Culver City. And then I interned at DC and Marvel when I was in college. DC first for Vertigo, under Joan Hilty and Karen Berger, people who are kind of legends now. And Cliff Chang was my boss. That's how old I am. Cliff Chang was still an editor back then, and he would tell me to photocopy things on the copy machine.
So and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just going off of like the comic book counter lore, like people come in and it's like, hey, do you know this wild thing about this creator? And you're like, I didn't, but thank you.
I want to hear, what are the crazy rumors about me?
So September 11th happens, and then you're like,
I didn't cause that. That was somebody else.
That's fair. That was not what I heard, but I heard that, as a patriotic young American, you were like, hey, I gotta kind of help here, and went into the CIA.
Yeah, that's totally true. I was working for the Justice Department at the time. Comics had collapsed. Marvel had gone into bankruptcy. Chris, like you said, I worked for Chris Claremont. I was his intern. And I remember Bob Harris, who was head of Marvel at that time, was like, "Comics are dead, kid. Just get out of the industry." And so I went off to become a lawyer. I was working for the Justice Department. And yeah, those assholes crashed those planes into those buildings. And just like a billion other people, I just wanted to do something to help. And I applied to the CIA. I was a dumb little kid. I applied to CIA over their website. I was like, "Can I please work for you as a spy?" And I thought they'd make me like, yeah, I thought they'd make me like, I was good with information. I was good with comic books. Like I knew like, oh, well, you know, Avengers 62 is the first appearance of whatever. But so I thought I'd do information, but they did all these like psychological, it was like a year-long process, you know, psychological tests and all these sort of things. And they're like, "No, you're a frontline guy. So go out there and fight terrorism." And then I served in a few wars, and that was my 20s. It was a weird time.
So, but like that's, yeah, I mean, I love how you quantify that as a weird time, but you do this thing, then you come back, you're like, "Oh yeah, comic books, I remember those," and then you just jump back into it. Is that kind of the timeline there?
I'd kind of, I would say I'd fallen off the comic book wagon. I mean, I like a lot of people in my generation, I had sort of, once the image boom started popping, I kind of got out of comics, and you know, in the late 90s. And then like a lot of people in my generation, like in the early aughts, when sort of these guys that are now I'm kind of the youngest of these peers because there's a generation beneath me, but like Brian K. Vaughan, who was just talking about Bendis, Brubaker, Gail Simone, yeah, that crop of just amazing talent, Mark Miller, came in comics and wrote I more like the Alan Moore generation, where the guys who were kids when Alan Moore was doing his thing, and we kind of were very influenced by that. And I was in Iraq, and my grandmother sent me like comic books because she went to the local comic book store and said, "What can I send to my young lad?" And literally just sent me a package. And I read, you know, it was Bendis' Spider-Man. It was like Kirkman's, whatever he was, Ultimate, something or other. And I was like, wow, comics are really good again. So I got really hardcore into comics even while I was in the CIA. And then I had my kid got born. I was doing domestic work here. I was doing like I was finally doing those dot connecting things. And my kid got born, and my wife and I were like, "Are we going to go overseas again?" And I'd spent a lot of time away from my wife in our marriage. And I grew up without a dad. I didn't want to grow up. And I really loved Warzone. This is kind of where I succeeded.
What?
I don't, love is the wrong word, but like it was more like I hated being behind a desk. I liked being out there in the world doing the job. But I couldn't be away from my kids. So I was like, well, what if I took a year and I was 30, you know, pursued my other sort of love and tried to become a comic book writer. And so that's what I did. I took a year and wrote a novel and got published, and that was sort of my stepping stone to comics.
So yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, you wrote a novel, right? Like it is a superhero novel, but it is like not that the diminishes.
It's got some pictures. It has some pictures, but yeah,
it does have some pictures, but it's not the work you're kind of known for now, right?
No, it was such a big flop. Nobody bought it. It was from a real publisher. It was from Simon & Schuster, but it made
Simon & Schuster.
It made zero money. It got decent reviews, but yeah, it was a big old flop. Like you won't find it at a Barnes and Noble. You gotta do a deep dive on eBay to find it. It's not.
I bet you could go on Amazon right now and find it.
I'm sure. Yes.
What's the name of the book in case somebody's like, "What's the name of the book? I gotta go find it now." What's
A Once Crowded Sky. I used to go. So once it was a flop, and I realized it was a flop, I would go. I was like, I have to find a way to sell this book because this was now my life. You know, I had abandoned a career for this, and so I would go from Comic Con to Comic Con, hand selling it. You know, just carrying around duffel bags full of books. You know, I took out my old duffel bags from Iraq that used to carry all my guns and put books in them, and went from, you know, just and I sold them for no profit. I sold them for 25-cent profit, just trying to get them in people's hands. I did that for 2 years, kind of Comic-Con.
But then obviously
I gave out free magnets and stuff.
Free? Why magnets? It was just a cool promotional, or
I was you gotta. I was not I was just like, you have to, someone's walking by. I'm sure any creator can tell you this, like the art of Artist Alley, like getting someone to stop and check out your shit. So like my thing was like, "Hey, do you want a free magnet?" And then they would stop and you'd give them a free magnet. And then you'd be like, "Hey, can I tell you about my book?" It was just to get someone to stop walking by. And,
so let me ask you this now then. What was your experience at cons then versus like, I mean, before the dark times started, but now, I mean, you're Tom King now, like that name has weight, right? Like you mentioned some of your contemporaries, the guys that you kind of came up with, like Mark Millar and, Bendis and Brubaker and Vaughn. but I mean, you're Tom King. I mean, you wrote one of the longest running ongoings for Batman on your own, which was my personal favorite, period. I mean, you were doing weird stuff in that book, and we could just spend the rest of this interview with me just showering praise on you for some of the stuff you've written that I thought was really cool and unique and interesting, but people won't think that's interesting. So what's it like now? Like, say cons come back and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go to a con. What's that like now versus like that experience after the novel came out?
Oh, it's such a great question. I don't think people have asked it before. I mean, back in those days, I mean, first of all, I would do any con. So I would do, I mean, I remember I would do shows in sort of rural Virginia. I'm out of DC. So, you know, basically like from Richmond to Philadelphia is the area I could just do any con in a weekend and still come home. So I would do, you know, little rural cons and fire stations. I would do little hotel shows, just anywhere someone was selling comic books. I would set up a table and try to get them to buy my novel. But you know, you'd have to do all the things you have that people struggle to get in Artist Alley. It's not an easy thing. You have to go online, you have to register, you have to hope they accept you. If they do accept you, you have to pay them money. You know, you have to rent the table from them. So you're paying them $200 to $1,000 to just sit in their table. And I had to, and then you like try to get, like, I got into Artist Alley in San Diego was super hard, but I got in, and then I was like, yes, I'm in San Diego. I finally, you get a ticket. And then I was in like the back wall of Artist Alley, like basically in the bathroom, right. Just all by myself, nobody ever coming up. So yeah, those were tough days, and it was kind of depressing because of those, not depressing, but like you would measure yourself by how much you sold. If you didn't sell enough, you had to go home to your wife and be like, I just wasted $400 on this weekend. And you would live for, oh, do I have it in here? I just took it out the other day. You would go to, I mean, the purpose of the con was twofold. It was, to sell the books, but it was also like to meet an editor or to meet a collaborator or to, just do the social game. So like that was so important. So I would be up till 3 a.m. every single night of a con, just trying to work the room and all that crap. So yeah, that's all. That was the old days. Yeah, nowadays I have a con agent. He's like, which cons do you want to go to? And knock on wood, a lot of cons give me money they pay me to come to them. And then I arrived there. I don't have to. Back then you had to carry bags and you had to have your whole setup with you. And then now someone does all that crap for me. And I sit there and there's like times and there's a line and I just sign, and then when I'm done I stop signing. It's a totally different.
Just go away. Yeah, that's the polar opposite. It sounds like of what your older experiences were like, right?
It is. I remember Paul Levitz coming up to me when I was like at the beginning of my Batman run when I have really long lines, and him just being like, dude, I was where you were once. Now nobody's in my line anymore. Good luck. Enjoy it.
Yeah, we actually Paul's done Coliseum Forum. He's he's
Paul.
One of the old guard for comics. But yeah, that sounds it's a very accurate Paul Levitz quote right there. So this was actually an elaborate scheme to verify 2 Tom King adjacent stories for me. I've had 2 Tom King adjacent experiences in my comics career, and so I figured I have to get enough credibility to get you on my show so that I could tell you these 2 stories and see if you can verify them.
I'm ready.
One, and I'm trying to remember her name. She's awesome. She just had a kid 2 years ago, but she's a doctor, and might have been your handler at a con. But you guys, I've seen you guys. Yeah, Constance. There you go. Constance is one of my customers at Coliseum Comics Riverside, which is in our Jacksonville store.
That's Constance, one of the great people on earth. She's great. She's wonderful.
She knows I'm a big Tom King fan, so I can't find where I sat it now. But remember I showed you my Heroes in Crisis pen?
Yeah.
That was from Constance after she had been on the
what a small little world. Yeah, Constance is awesome. Anyone who does the con circuit knows Constance. She works for Expo, but she's been a super comic fan since she was like 12 years old, and so she knows everybody. She just knows. But my favorite thing about Constance is in the wonderful before times. I'm a huge Walton Louise Simonson fan, and she's like with her niece, like they love her, like they go so far back with her. And I was like, would you like possibly arrange a meeting? She's like, what if I arrange a dinner and at Baltimore Comic Con? And that became a running tradition that we did that for like 3 to 4 years in a row, where every Baltimore Comic Con I would take Walt and Wheezy and Constance out to dinner, and we just talk comics for an hour. And there's just no better people in a comics than Walt and Wheezy Simonson. And it was wonderful.
That's incredible. What a small world, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that is one confirmed. Okay, perfect. All right, so next one, Heroes in Crisis. I love that book. Big fan of that book.
Everybody hates that book.
I know, I'm a weirdo, but I promise you, I sold a bunch of that book because, you know, the thing that sells comics the most are enthusiasm. If you're into a book, you can get your customers into a book. And then what's the worst thing? They come back and tell you, like, you have bad taste in comics? No, they're not going to. Maybe sometimes there have been people who've done that, but it doesn't happen often.
I love it. I don't defend it because people have such big opinions. It's not worth defending it, but I love it. I adore the book. So.
I think I love it. And the variant covers were probably my favorite variant covers coming out that year, where you guys did the file of like the Crisis
cool.
moment and the Polaroid. Loved it. Collected them all. Big fan.
That was Jim Lee's idea. That was right from Jim.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because they're such good covers. And if you guys haven't seen them, go look them up. The Heroes in Crisis variant covers, they were awesome. The only thing I was weird was like they had that different paper stock, that textured paper stock. And so they had like a weird feeling to them. They were cool.
They're really hard to sign because the paper changes everywhere if you're trying to sign those guys.
Yeah.
Stuff.
So, well, here's the thing. I have a signed copy of Heroes in Crisis #1. Superman was the variant on #1, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So I used to be the Coliseum of Comics new Tampa manager or Tampa store. And this kid comes in and he's from DC and the Redskins are in town. Well, the Washington football team are in town
Sure.
to play the Buccaneers, right? And so of course you go on vacation. What do? You check out the local comics fair, right? Well, he's telling me about his comic book store at home and how cool his comic book store is. And it's a store that I'm sure you're familiar with, Third Eye Comics. But how this place is okay too. Thanks, Beth. But we had a really nice conversation and we were talking about creators we really liked. And of course, you come up and I'm talking about how cool Heroes in Crisis is and how I love these variants, but I missed the variant on #1. And then I guess you did a signing at Third Eye. And yes. Like a week later after this, and I didn't know this stuff, but a week later, I get a FedEx package to the store addressed to me, not the store. I open it up and it's a signed Heroes in Crisis #1 by you, obviously. And it's a letter from this kid going like, hey man, I really enjoyed your store. I enjoyed talking to you. I know you're a big Tom King fan. He did a signing at my store. You mentioned you were missing this one. Here it is. And it's signed by you.
Wow, what a great kid. That's awesome. Third Eye is a great store. It's in Annapolis. It's in suburban Maryland, but it looks like Disneyland. It's so huge. It's wonderful. And it's my local store. I drive 40. I live in downtown DC, but I drive 45 minutes out with my kids to go to that one, just because the right store with the right attitude will always get the loyalty. You'll travel to go there.
I'm just saying. I've seen Third Eye and I know they're good, but until you make it down to Florida to visit a Coliseum,
I gotta go. I'm not saying I'll go. I can't wait. I gotta see.
Now I'm like really concerned because like I had that pen at the beginning of our interview and like I kind of cherish that thing. Like Constance is one of my favorite customers. She's awesome. They gave that to me. And then I showed it to you and then sat it down. I don't know. Maybe it's like the Green Lantern ring, like it's on to the next.
That's right. It has chosen the next sad person who needs it.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what is this? Yeah. So let's kind of rewind back to Batman. As a fanboy, I'm going to ask some fanboy questions now.
Love fanboy questions.
Was it your decision or was it DC's decision not to let him get married?
It was never. I had pitched them getting married in the beginning. I was like, let's get them married in the very beginning, and DC's like, no, that's not going to happen. And then I was like, I bet I can eventually kind of change their minds. But it was always planned that she would stand him up at the wedding. That was always the plan for the whole run in issue 50, because it was always like establishment, and then like so we sort of establish who we are for the first 25 issues, then we get engaged, and then he climbs in happiness to issue 50, and then he gets his heart broken, he falls to issue 75, and then climbs his way back to 100 to a new happiness. Like that was always the plan, like kind of a zigzag sine graph. So the horrible decision that was made was marketing, and I was not involved in all, and I in fact pushed back on it and have regrets about it, was the idea that DC was made it like the wedding of the year is coming rather than will they, won't they get married, which is
Right.
And it was funny because Scott Snyder called me and he's like, dude, you're going to get killed. And I was like, oh, DC knows what they're doing. You know, and I was like, and I did get killed. So, but yeah, the plan was always for them not to get married and for me to slowly convince DC into them getting married. Which, if you read the most recent Batcat, I feel like I'm almost there. if you read the special.
I have not read the special yet because I am a comics retailer, and so my stack is working my way through, and I'm like 2 weeks behind. So if you get like an email next week, like, oh my god, it's wonderful, please know I just finally got around to reading that issue.
Thanks. It's long. It's a 38 pager, so save it first when you have time.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, absolutely. That is one thing. I don't know. I've noticed a lot of my peers in the industry, and not to talk bad about my peers because they're great and comics are awesome, but like you get kind of jaded and you just kind of like flip through the books and you're like, yeah, kid, there's X-Men's over there, right? No, comics are still awesome, man. I still love reading comics. I still love reading Tom King comics. So
I'm the same way. It's still where I go to relax. It's still the last thing I read before I fall asleep at night. I'm still looking forward to picking up books. I mean, I'm kind of behind the code, so I kind of, I'm like the Matrix where I see the code, I see different things in it. So it's a little harder to read contemporary comics because I see my friends making them, but I still can get carried away with the news. Like you were just talking about the X-Men, that stuff just carried me away, and I wasn't seeing John Hickman, I was seeing X-Men, I was seeing Cyclops, and like that's the best feeling when you're just like back in the world. I love it.
When it's like you're watching, the coolest movie or cartoon like unfold in front of you. This is how I always explain it to like new people is like, hey, comics is like your favorite TV show, but you only get to watch an episode a month. Oh, and the episodes are like 10 minutes long. So like I'll give you a great example.
And you have to pay $5 for them.
And you pay $5. Yeah, why do we read comics again? No. So that was a great example using Tom King and Robert Kirkman. I was a huge fan of your Batman run. I was a huge fan of Kirkman's Invincible. It's one of my all-time favorites as well.
Oh, good. My son just read the whole thing, 300 issues in like 3 weeks. He didn't leave the couch. It was amazing because I have them all on my shelf, obviously. So it's just like I'm going through them.
That I can't sell that book enough. But you're not Robert Kirkman's. But either way, it's an amazing book. But with your Batman,
it's 160 issues.
160, yeah. 172, or is it 160?
Somewhere's in there. Yeah, somewhere in there. I know it's not a 300.
Yeah. Your Batman, Robert Kirkman's Invincible. I would save them for like 6 months, so there was at least like 6 issues to read, because if I read one issue, I'd be mad until the next month. Like, and I didn't like that feeling, so I had to like save it and get enough, like a big enough meal so that I could like preserve to save up for another 6 months, because if I was doing them monthly, it wasn't enough. So
when I came back into comics in the aughts, the way I read comics was super weird. I would listen to review podcasts. I was just when podcasts started breaking. I listened to iFanboy, Around Comics, Word Balloon, and they would be like, "Here's the books that came out that week," and they would review them. I'm like, okay. And then at the end of the month, I would go on. I would because we didn't have a local store back then. I would go online and I'd buy just the trades, and I would read them retroactively. So that was how I read comics. Like I'd get my weekly hit by podcasts, and I would actually read the comics and trades.
Are you still a podcast guy? Do you have time for podcasts?
Yeah, of course. Dude, anyone who has kids and has to do chores has time for podcasts.
Man, you were telling me you have 3, right? I have 2.
I have 3. Yeah.
I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and so we're in that hard like rebel against this. Like
that's a tough age to go through a pandemic with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Yeah, man. And like I'm like, oh, this is they're punk rock and I'm the system. I get it now. Okay, cool. It's not cool. It's not the best thing, but I love being a dad, and I can't wait to see what kind of comics and stuff they get into. But yeah, no, I'm with you. Chores. I drive a lot for Coliseum because, again, like I said, we start in Tampa, go to Jacksonville. That's basically half the state. Podcast. What I was going to recommend, Gutter Boys, which is a comics podcast, and then And then Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, if you're an X-Men guy, which you used to work on the X-Men.
James
So
and Miles Smith. I haven't listened. I used to listen to all the comic book podcasts. Not all, but there used to only be like 7 of them when I first started. Now there's of course 30,000. But the moment I started writing comics seriously, I stopped listening to anything that talked about contemporary comics or would talk about me. I'll listen to interview shows, but I won't listen to people talking about issues because it just stresses me out. And when you listen to a podcast, you don't want to be stressed out. So
well, that was the thing I had mentioned in our pre-interview is like, hey man, if you've never TikToked yourself or searched TikTok for yourself and you need that self-esteem boost, I'd recommend it. It was I was like, wow, these TikTokers really love Tom King. There's like a few like fan dedicated TikToks. Like I was like, oh, Tom King has a TikTok. That's it's very forward of him, like because we're old guys. And then it's like, nope, that's just some big old fan of Tom King's talking about how awesome Grayson is or how awesome Vision or you know what I mean? It's pretty cool. Like there are people, they wake up and they dedicate part of their day to being a fan of yours, which how cool is that?
That's the best. I did just join TikTok this weekend, so I'm hip with the TikTok now. So but I've only posted 1 video and it's something my son made, so that's how good I am at it. Yeah, no, I can't even comprehend that someone there are many things in comics I can't comprehend, and I think it's probably best I don't think about them because it'll clog my writing. But like, yeah, people are like, hey, I'm in Singapore and I just read your comic. What? Are you kidding? You're across the world and just read my comic? Or yeah, or someone posting it. You know, it blows my mind. I know one time I got 2 Scott Snyder stories. One time I was my very beginning of my career, Scott was telling me he's like, I was like, what's it like writing comics? He's like, well, sometimes I sit around and I'm like, well, you know, when like a baseball stadium is full, stack 3 of those on top of each other and they're all reading my Batman on Wednesday. I was like, oh my God, what a thought.
I mean, it's true though, right? You can look at the sales data and then you quantify the number. You're like, oh yeah, it's like 3 Lakers. Where did the Lakers play? I was gonna.
At Staples Center. Oh no, now it's the Crypto Center, but it used to be Staples Center until like a few weeks ago. Now it's crypto.com.
I'm a huge Bills fan, and so I'm getting over that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, what a horrible week to be a Bills fan. One of the worst weeks, except those other weeks that you were a Bills fan.
Exactly, except for the prior also 37 years of my life leading up to that night. Yeah.
Oh, what a game though. Oh god damn, that was a game. Ooh,
that's what me and my brother,
but it was a hell of a game.
We're going through the stages of grief, and like that was kind of my acceptance when I was like, man, but like, have you read the sports press? Like everybody's just talking about how it's like one of the greatest NFL games of all time, and it's like, yeah, he's behind me. He's still at like anger, acceptance at this point. So this is something you always wonder, especially when somebody has, you know, such a kind of depth of career. When you look back on things you've worked on, and I know artists are always harder on themselves than they should be, or they always think they could do better, but what stories are you most proud of that Tom King has made?
I mean, of course, I feel like every writer has to say this, so it sounds rote, but I'll say it anyways. Of course, I never made any comic books. I'm always making them with some partner. It's all a collaborative medium, right? Like, I mean, there are not like stories. I mean, there are issues that stick out to me that I'm super proud of. Sheriff of Babylon 5, which is the conversation issue. Vision 10, which is the issue where he does the prayer with his daughter. Mr. Miracle 6, which is the issue where they plan the house and he finds out she's pregnant. They're just fighting. There are little things like that. Rorschach 11, which is like where he turns into Rorschach.
You know, there's a speculator somewhere with a pen and paper right now, like just taking notes.
I did a Commandy one shot I'm really proud of that no one read. The 2 comics that came out today. With my Batman, all the annuals that I didn't do annual 3. Tom Taylor did that one, but I did the first annual, which is the dog story, which is about my dog, which I love. The second annual, which is about, you know, like with Lee Weeks, with the whole relationship, and the 4th annual, which is with Jorge, which I think was my best Batman story I told, which is sort of about how Batman fights a new villain every day.
Okay.
So yeah, those things stick out. And anything I did with Mitch or Clay, always those, because those are my boys.
Is that Clayman?
Clayman, yeah. I think
Right?
Clayman drives me insane, but he draws like an angel.
He does draw like an angel. Can I tell you my Clayman story? This was
yeah, he's from your neck of the woods.
So last year we had Rob Liefeld come visit us, and we did this really cool thing where like he did a signing at our stores, obviously, and then we hosted this like private event where I did one of these Coliseum forums live with him on stage, and you got to hang out and like eat dinner, and then he watched Deadpool with you and like walked around and like, you know,
awesome,
ate dinner. Yeah, it was a cool event. Well, I guess Clayman is a Rob Liefeld fan, and I'm one of the people that's responsible for answering our social media, and we get a message from Clayman like, hey, what's the deal with this Rob Liefeld thing? And I'm just like, hey, are you like award-winning comics artist Clayman? He's like, yeah, but like me and my brothers want to come to this dinner. What's that about? And that was like my entire interaction with Clayman.
That sounds like my boy. Yeah, that sounds like
it's a big deal for me as a fan. I'm like, what? Okay, Clayman, let me tell you about this cool thing we're doing this week.
Yeah, he's super cool and super talented, and also he looks like a male model, so it's hard to walk around with him because he good looks.
You might not even be Tom King, to be honest. I've never seen your face until this interview. You think I would like Google like, hey, what does Tom King look like before I interviewed you? You could just be some very elaborate
imposter. Yes. Yeah, totally. Who's Tom King? Yeah, I'm the TikTok guy who just knows Tom King's work, and
that's why you know so much about your history, because you're the guy that runs the TikTok fan page. Wow, can you hear my 3-year-old? That's a first.
Hi, nice to meet you. What's his name or her name?
It's Leonardo. He's currently
Leonardo, you nerd.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. That actually, I don't even take credit for that. That was totally my wife. She was like 6 months pregnant. We hadn't come up with a name, and she starts laughing at me in the car, and I'm like, what? And she's like, hey, what if we named him Leonardo? And I was like, you mean like the Ninja Turtle? And she starts cracking up like it's the funniest joke she ever told. I don't know if she expected to get the buy-in but she did immediately. I was like, yes, Leonardo is a perfect name.
That's how it happens. I love it. I have a kid, Charlie, who's after Charlie Brown, so I can't complain.
Oof,
so I have dude, did you read that shit yesterday or today?
I did. It was today. It was like,
that is some dark stuff. I didn't want to know that. That's like you read that and you're like, I didn't want to know.
In fact, the aforementioned brother is still going through the grief. The Bill sent me that article, and it's just like, makes sense. That's the timeline we live in. That was all he said.
Jesus. Dude, you guys got Josh Allen for 10 years. What are you complaining about? I live in Washington. We have nothing. We have nothing. Even we have a horrible owner and a horrible team. You should be happy.
He doesn't even have a name.
We don't even have a name. We don't even have a name.
It's the football team.
I've been in Washington 20 years. We've never won anything. No. I mean, our hockey team won, but who cares about hockey? Jesus.
See, I experienced my masochism through, I think I got that word right. My masochism through sports. So I'm a Bills fan, but I'm also a big Flyers fan. It hadn't been good to be a Flyers fan in a really long time. So
we did have the Nats win, but I'm not the biggest baseball fan. My kids were, so that was good. That was all right.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty good. Yeah. All right, so back on, we're way in the weeds here. I apologize.
Sports talk with Tom King.
Yes, if you guys didn't know, I'm starting a new podcast with Tom King where we're going to talk about sports. Anyways, Human Target. I mean, can I ask, what is with you and these like deep cut characters at both publishers? And you're like, hey, I'm going to like make these guys cool again. I mean, we already talked about Mr. Miracle a little bit. Now you're doing Human Target with Smallwood, right?
Yeah. I incredibly enjoy when I was a kid, those were the comics I loved the most, were the comics that took kind of small characters and twisted them into really cool things. Like I loved Squadron Supreme when I was a kid with the Mark Grunwald thing. And I loved the Challengers of the Known with Jeff Loeb. I loved, that was just why I was always drawn to that. You know, I was like a big New Mutants fan, and I was an Avengers fan. Everyone liked X-Men. So I don't believe in obscure characters. I think that every character has a cool story. And if you can find the right artist, you can make anyone awesome. Maybe not Brother Power the Geek, but like almost everyone.
So are these the kind of projects you like seek out, or is this kind of like, are the editors just like, hey Tom, will you make Human Target cool now? Hey, can you bring Mr. Miracle back to the forefront?
I always do better with a project when they come to me with a character. I'm better off than sometimes I do choose, like we chose Adam Strange for Strange Adventures and chose Mr. Terrific. But I much more enjoy the challenge where an editor's like, here's Vision, here's Mr. Miracle, here's Human Target. And then I have to kind of dig in and kind of find the inspiration. It's just easier than being like told blank slate and being like, what do I want to put on here? If there's like a little bit of inspiration there, if there's something you can steal from, you can go back and like with Human Target, going back and reading the old Len Wein original run in the 70s and seeing him as this guy with his shirt open to his navel, having cocktails. It was 1982, it was a different time with Dick and you're just like, yeah, I like this guy. I want to write. Like I've written a lot of characters, but I haven't written anyone cool. I wanted to write someone cool. Finally, like Scott Free's not cool. He has a lot of anxiety. Adam Strange is not cool. He's betraying people. Batman he's like awesome and kick ass, but he's not cool. He's uptight. He's got a fucking diamond up his ass, like shaped like his dead parents. I wanted to write someone who was awesome. So that was Human Target.
So kind of let's go into that, like kind of your creative process, because you kind of hit it on the head there. I mean, you're writing these guys that are distinctly different. I mean, you've got Bruce Wayne, evil capitalist. You've got Scott Free, who is basically an anxiety machine. You got Adam Strange. Like how do you find, like when you sit down at your classic typewriter or however you're handling it these days, how do you find their voices, right? Like, so for me, like when I read your Batman, like, yeah, man, that was Batman. Like in my head, when I read your Mr. Miracle, you're even Vision. Like, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's what this is how they would talk, right? How do you find their voices?
I don't know, when I was a kid and I got bored, I would disappear into comic books inside my head, and I would pretend I was Superman, I would pretend I was Batman, or I don't know, or an X-Men character, and I would just create adventures, and I would just be those people. And that was kind of like where I lived. I was one of those kids who like lived didn't want to play with friends. I just wanted to live in my fantasies, whatever. And my parents, get out of that cloud and come and do your math homework. And little do they know the cloud was where I would make my money, right? Like that's
yeah.
So I don't, you write them and you just kind of, you're like Dead Man. You leave your own body and you enter theirs and you start writing it, right? Like I mean, the secret, every writer knows this, but like, it's really hard to write yourself. Like, or at least I had to learn that lesson. It's really hard to like sit down and be like, I'm going to base a character on me and write about me. Cause like my thoughts are the most boring thoughts in the world because I've been living with them all this time. I've had 43 years of these stupid thoughts. They're boring. Right. So I do that. So that's awful. So when I pretend to be somebody else, it's like, oh yeah, I'm pretending to be somebody else. And these are Bruce Wayne's thoughts. He's going to kick ass, or these are Scott Free's going to do this, but then you realize, like, when you look back, that like you were actually writing about yourself, and every single character is just a different aspect of you. But it's like it's your subconscious comes through your pretending. So that's like the magic of writing. It's like you escape yourself, but find yourself at the end.
I have one last question for you, and we don't try to cultivate controversy here on Coliseum Forum. We're typically
all right. Where are we going?
So this is a big kind of controversy last year, right?
Do I think they should trade Josh Allen to the Washington football team?
Absolutely not.
I'm into it. See, this is good.
This is how you stop being one of my favorite creators, saying wildly inappropriate things like that. So heroes don't do that. Do you remember this from last year?
Heroes don't do that? No, I don't know this. What is this?
You're gonna make okay. Listen, I walked into this. I asked. So they were talking about Batman and his adult time proclivities, and somebody over at DC said Batman doesn't do that.
Oh, that thing. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Yes, a sexual activity with a woman. Yes, correct. I understand. We're adults.
wrote Batman.
But you have a
for-
3-year-old in your room, so I gotta be better.
No, he's off. I didn't know if you could hear him because I'm actually in my office, but he's out there being sassy with his mom. And I didn't know if you guys at home could hear him being sassy because he is very good at it and very loud sometimes. So yeah, as somebody that was Batman's voice for 85 issues plus 12 issue miniseries plus 3 specials now, right? Or 2 annuals and then in the special.
Yes. Yeah, I think I've written more Batman than anyone alive.
Yeah,
that's
Whoa.
insane.
What about Snyder? He's got to be close, right?
Well, because I was double shipping, his Batman run was only 50 issues. And he
Oh
a few
yeah.
of them. So that leaves me 35 ahead already. So
well, there you go. So as somebody that has spent this much time in Batman's head, where does Bruce stand on that?
Well, as someone who gets paid by the corporation that's in charge of this, I have no comment on this controversy. I'm glad people are interested in Batman's lives, and I will point you to my own comics where you can read into my opinions.
Excellent. Tom,
and Lord knows
so much
I've written a lot of sexy Batcat.
That I think that's indisputable at this point. Guys, if you haven't checked it out, we've got Hard Target at your local Coliseum or your local comic shop near you. Also check out the Batman Catwoman special. Both of those dropped today. I mean, 2 books in one day, man. Can you calm down? Save some for the other creators. We only have so much shelf space.
We had Supergirl last week, so I've had a lot. Oh, and next week's creator owned. I have my creator owns coming out next week. So
can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's all super secret. I mean, it's not coming out. It's being announced next week. So we're in prep for the big announcement. My first creator owned, my first ongoing since Batman. It's big.
Can we at least beat the publisher out of you?
No, we can't even beat the publisher.
All right. Well, Tom, you are the coolest, man. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and join us here on Coliseum Forum tonight. If you ever want to come back, or hey, if Mitch wants to swing by, we'd be happy to have Mitch as well.
Like, you got to have me in to do some signings. I feel like we're finally, God, we're emerging from this god awful thing, and I want to go to every store and say thank you for getting us through this, because it's been a hard 2 to 3 years, and the comic book store still being alive is something we did not anticipate at the beginning of this, and it takes a lot of hard fucking work. And I just want to say thank you.
Steve Jeffy at Diamond, build back better, guys. We're coming back stronger. Thank you so much, Tom. Anytime you want to come visit us, please let us know. We'd be happy to have you.
Awesome. Take care, man.